You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change. So I hope the last podcast was useful and interesting and did inspire you to experiment with dealing effectively with negative narratives. In other words, how to dispel them. And as I said, one of the things I want to do is I want to give you a bit of a taste for different therapies and how they deal with them, okay? But also to see whether you can pick up on, essentially what are some commonalities, what are some, themes that thread through what fundamentally therapy might look like. And yes, I'm being very specific here, and it doesn't necessarily give the whole flavour of what a therapeutic session might be, but it gives you a little bit of a taste to use this as an exercise in your life. If you're finding you've got these pesky negative fairy tales running through your head. Now, let me take it into today's podcast. So, here's a quote. Things are neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So, if you're well versed in literature, you probably have picked where this comes from. For those of you who aren't or who are just not interested in it, let me give you a heads up. Essentially, this is from William Shakespeare's play Hamlet. And the quote is spoken by the character Hamlet, the main dude in this, who's really sort of reflecting on his situation and fundamentally the nature of reality. In the context of the play, Hamlet's contemplating the nature of good and evil and how one's perception and interpretation of events can shape one's experience. He is considering the idea that events themselves are fundamentally neutral. But it's our thoughts, our beliefs that give them meaning and make them positive or negative. In essence, what Hamlet is saying is that our thoughts and perceptions create our reality. It's not the external events themselves that determine whether they're good or bad, but rather our interpretation of them. Therefore, if we can change our thoughts and beliefs, we can change our experience of the world. Now, this quote's been widely used in various fields of psychology and self-help, as it highlights the power of your thoughts and beliefs to shape your experience of your world. It encourages us, therefore, to examine our thoughts and beliefs and to question whether they're helpful or unhelpful in creating a positive and fulfilling life. So by doing so, individuals can develop a more positive and optimistic outlook and cultivate a more fulfilling and satisfying life experience. And so it's one of the fundamentals in shifting out of survival mode or of a state of heightened anxiety or stress into a place where we can grab a hold of living and making it a thriving experience. So, hello and again, welcome to this podcast. Now, in this podcast, I'm looking at how to dispel negative narratives using rational emotive behaviour therapy, REBT. And so in this episode, we're going to discuss the core principles of how REBT and how it can help you to overcome negative narratives that are holding you back. So let's get started. This particular approach, REBT, is a type of cognitive behavioural therapy that was developed by psychologist Albert Ellis in the 1950s. I had the opportunity to work with him very shortly, but definitely. And in his own right, this was a man who took no prisoners when it came to helping you overcome your irrationalities. And, you really very quickly learned how to deal with some of your own negative narratives in your head. And I say this smilingly because on the one hand, people often said, he's not very empathic and, he's not compassionate. Well, in a sense, you could interpret it like that. But on the other hand, this was a man committed to helping not only himself overcome his negative narratives, those fairy tales, those destructive stories we tell ourselves, but he took it to many, many people as a therapist. And for that, I deeply respected the man. So, but fundamentally, REBT is based on that very premise that our emotions and behaviours are fundamentally and largely determined by our thoughts and beliefs. And that by changing our thinking, we can change our emotions and behaviours. And pretty much that's the core, that's the essence of most self-help, most coaching, most motivational, speaking, is that the speakers come back to this fundamental principles. Always. It's not just occasionally. So the question then arises, well, how can you use REBT to dispel negative narratives? Well, there's 4 key steps. Firstly, and again, you got to be able to identify the narrative. You've got to be able, if you're going to overcome it, identify what your thinking and what your beliefs are that are holding you back. Now, in REBT, one of the things that we do is we work with in-between session. We work with homework. Now, a lot of people sort of get a bit antsy about that and don't particularly like it, but it's very effective. So the first step in identifying negative narratives is that you write them down and you examine them very closely. And the question you need to ask yourself is, are they based on facts or are they simply assumptions that you're making? The second step, once you've done the first, is to challenge the narrative. So once you've identified your negative story, it's time to challenge it, time to take it apart. Ask yourself, is this thought or belief really true? What evidence do I have to support it? Often negative narratives are based on distorted thinking patterns such as black and white thinking, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing. I knew she always hated me. Really? Well, at some point she didn't, because you got together and were in a relationship. So by challenging these patterns, you can begin to see the situation more realistically. Now, reality can be a harsh teacher, mentor, coach, mistress, master, right? But, no pain, no gain, folks. It's a lesson that I learned, that most of my clients are learning. And so, if we're going to overcome and become, in a sense, masters of our own life, our own being, then we need to actually also feel the pain points. Now, the third step in all of this is to replace the narrative. So once you've challenged the negative story, your negative thoughts, your negative beliefs, it's time to replace them with more positive or realistic ones. Ask yourself, what would be a more helpful way to think about the situation? What are some positive aspects or realistic aspects of this situation that I may have overlooked? By replacing negative thoughts with positive ones or realistic ones, you can begin to feel better about yourself and your life. But most importantly, what it does is it reduces the negative emotion attached to your interpretation of the experience, of yourself, of your life. What's the fourth step? Well, the fourth step, folks, is really simple. As going into the gym to get fitter, this is about repetition. So practice, practice, practice. And you will get better and better at dispelling those negative stories. So you need to make a conscious effort to notice when your negative thoughts or beliefs arise and come up and grab you and try to throw you into the pit. And challenge and replace them with constructive, logical, rational, and objective thinking. They're the three things that I point out to people. If you think logically, rationally, and objectively, rather than subjectively, over time this becomes a habit, and you'll find that you're thinking more logically, rationally, and objectively. And so your life, you're going to feel better, your life's going to run better, not without obstacles, but it's just going to be better. So let's take a quick look at the core beliefs, the core principles in our REBT. According to Albert Ellis, there are three main components of emotional disturbance, and I think it's really a neat framework. Firstly, it's about irrational beliefs. Irrational beliefs are unrealistic, illogical, and irrational. They could be separately like that, or they could be the whole gig. So, for example, if you have a belief that you need to be perfect in order to be happy, life's going to be really tough. The other one is it's terrible when things don't go my way. Well, you can imagine what that's going to be like in your life. The second principle is emotional and behavioral consequences. So that's really when we hold irrational beliefs, we may experience negative emotions such as anxiety, depression, rage, anger, frustration. But we also are more likely to engage in self-defeating behaviours like procrastination, avoidance, or in particular cases, substance abuse. It's a good example of that. The third principle is rational alternatives. Rational alternatives are beliefs that are realistic, logical, and rational and objective. For example, it's okay to make mistakes. I can learn from my failures. Losing my partner isn't going to end of the world, but it's painful and I need to accept that pain. So, think about how you can apply these principles to your own life. Think about the impact that this can have on your life. So let me run through a couple. Imagine that you've been struggling with social anxiety and you constantly worry about being judged by others. Your negative narrative might be, I can't handle being judged by others, so I need to avoid social situations at all costs. Now in REBT, you would firstly identify that negative narrative and recognise that it is not helpful for either your mental health or your social life. Then you would challenge this narrative by asking yourself, is this thought really true? Do I have any evidence to support it? You might realise that you have gone to social events before and have not been judged. And in any event, how do you know if someone's judging you unless they say it to your face? In which case, that's not your problem, it's theirs for being rude. So, even if they did judge you, it's not the end of the world. Next, you would replace this negative narrative with the more realistic, logical alternatives. For example, you might tell yourself it's natural to feel nervous in some social situations, but I can handle it. Remember, you're acknowledging the anxiety, but you're also reinforcing your competency in managing it. Such as, I have strengths and qualities that others appreciate, and I can focus on those instead of worrying about being judged. Finally, you would practice this narrative intentionally and intentionally seek out social situations and challenge your negative thoughts when they arise. With time and practice and some effort, you'll begin to feel more confident and therefore less anxious in any of those social situations. So what I want you to do, and all of us have some of these negative narratives going, and we can always be better with them. Now in this case, I'm going to suggest to you that you do exactly what we do in REBT and begin to identify those negative narratives, write them down and begin to challenge them. So let's review the key takeaways from this podcast. And I want you to really take a hold of this, because you can apply this in every situation, whether it's at work, whether it's being a parent and you're feeling guilty or anxious in your parenting. So here's the gig. Takeaway: identify the negative narrative, challenge the narrative, replace the narrative, and keep practicing. Remember, like in the gym, like trying to lose weight, this takes time, but you will get better at it. And if you stick with it persistently and consistently, you will get results. Okay, all you guys out there, thank you again for listening to my podcast. In the next one, I'm going to talk about dispelling negative narratives in a framework of Zen, because I'm particularly partial to Zen, and I think it's a beautiful, elegant way of living and growing as a human being. So until next time, be inspired, inspire others, and I look forward to your company with the next podcast. Until then, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.